Here is the full English translation of your story. I kept the emotional tone, the poetic flow, and the original feel while making it natural and fluent in English. If part 1 of our story was about learning to love while the whole world was watching, then part 2 is about learning to love when no one is looking anymore. Chicago no longer feels strange to me. A year has passed since the day I drove out of that university town. I'm no longer the impulsive, terrified senior. I'm now a full-time employee at a media company, with deadlines, contracts, and meetings that keep me awake until 2 in the morning. And I still have Hugo. We survived our first year of long-distance love. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But we're still here. Hugo is now a sophomore. He's no longer lost. He plays music more, carries himself with more confidence. And the thing that makes me proudest, his mother has started calling to check on me. The first time she spoke to me on FaceTime, she stared at me for a long moment. "You're the one?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She didn't smile, but she didn't hang up either. To me, that was a victory. We still keep our Sunday night video call tradition, but a habit can never replace presence. Some nights I come home from work, shoulders heavy with stress, and all I want is to lie beside Hugo and listen to him breathe. Instead, I stare at a phone screen. One April evening, Hugo said, "I got an internship offer." I looked up from my laptop. "Where?" "Here." Took me a few seconds to understand. "Here, as in Chicago?" He nodded, unable to hide his smile. "For the summer." My heart pounded so hard I had to stand up and pace the room. "When do you start?" "June." I don't remember exactly how I smiled. I only remember nearly shouting with joy. After a whole year of loving through a screen, we were finally going to live in the same city. No more counting time zones. No more waiting for weekends. No more, "I wish you were here." He would be here. The day Hugo moved to Chicago, I stood in the apartment lobby watching the taxi pull up. He stepped out, hair a little longer, skin a little more sun-kissed than it had been in winter. I didn't wait for him to grab his suitcase. I walked straight to him and pulled him into my arms right there on the busy sidewalk.
Hugo whispered.
1 year of missing each other folded into those 2 small words. Living in the same city didn't mean everything suddenly became easy. We didn't move in together right away. Hugo rented a room in a shared apartment near his internship. I didn't want him to feel like he had to depend on me, but we saw each other almost every day. Dinner, movies, nights he was too tired to go home and ended up sleeping in my bed. For the first time in a year, I could touch him without counting down the days until we had to say goodbye. One night we were lying in my bed, window open, summer breeze carrying the warm city scent into the room. Hugo looked at me. "You feel different," he said. "Better different or scary different?" "Stronger." I smiled. I had to grow up. So did I. We kissed. Not the kiss of 2 scared college kids anymore. It was the kiss of 2 men who knew exactly who they were choosing. My hand traced his spine, feeling our breaths fall into the same rhythm.
No rush.
No fear of losing each other. Only certainty. But growing up also brought new challenges. Hugo started his internship at a small music company. He told me about his coworkers, his strict boss, the late-night networking events. I listened, proud and worried at the same time. One night I asked, "Do you see yourself moving here after graduation?" Hugo stayed quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet." The answer made sense, but it still made my heart sink. "Chicago isn't the only city in the world," he said gently. I know. I did know. But I also knew I had started building a life here. For the first time, the distance between us wasn't miles anymore. It was dreams. One evening after he came home from networking, I realized I was jealous. Not of any specific person, but of a future that no longer revolved only around me. "I don't want you to stay in Chicago just because of me," I said as we sat on the balcony. Hugo turned to me. "I don't want you to leave just because of me." We looked at each other and understood. Loving as adults is harder than loving as students. It's no longer about the whole world is watching. It's about where are we going? And that question still had no answer. Summer in Chicago was hotter than I expected. The city felt like it was steaming under the sun, asphalt shimmering. Hugo slowly adapted: crowded trains, rooftop bars, evenings by Lake Michigan with the wind whipping around us. I watched him change little by little. He wasn't the lost freshman anymore. He wasn't the boy who trembled when he first told his mother he loved a man. Hugo started talking about career. He came home later. His eyes lit up when he told me a famous producer had noticed his demo. He talked about New York, Los Angeles, places with more opportunities for music. I listened, and something nameless rose in my chest.
Pride.
And fear. One Friday night we went to a company party. I wanted to introduce Hugo to my colleagues as an official part of my life. "This is my boyfriend, Hugo," I said to Mark and the others. The word boyfriend slipped out naturally now, full of pride. Hugo shook their hands, smiled politely. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking young and confident at the same time. I noticed a few eyes linger a little longer than usual. I didn't care. We had already survived the fear of being seen. Now we faced those looks with calm. When we left the party, Hugo took my hand on the crowded sidewalk. "You didn't hesitate," he said. "About what?" "Calling me your boyfriend." I stopped and looked straight into his eyes. "I never wanted to call you anything else." Hugo kissed me right there in the middle of the busy street. Not for show. Just enough to say, "We're here." But that night when we got home, an email was waiting in Hugo's inbox. A small record label in New York wanted to interview him after the internship. New York, almost 800 miles from Chicago. I stared at the laptop screen. "When?" I asked. "September." Silence. Hugo looked at me, trying to read my face. "I haven't said yes yet." "Why not?" "Because I wanted to talk to you first." Those words warmed me and crushed me at the same time. I didn't want to be the reason he turned down an opportunity. But I also didn't want to lose him to another city. "You should go," I said finally. Hugo frowned slightly. "Even if it means leaving?" "Even if." He stepped closer and touched my cheek. "Why do you always act stronger than you feel?" I laughed, a little sad. "Because someone has to." The weeks that followed passed in a strange, floating state. We still worked, cooked together, fell asleep in each other's arms. But between every kiss there was a silent question. Could we survive living in two different cities again? One night, lying beside each other, Hugo whispered, "Do you ever imagine a future where we live together?" "Every day," I answered. "What does it look like?" I closed my eyes. A small apartment with a tiny balcony. 2 cups of coffee in the morning. Him playing guitar in the living room while I worked at the dining table. Arguing about whose turn it is to wash the dishes. Falling asleep in each other's arms. "Boring," I said softly. Hugo laughed. "I like boring." I opened my eyes. "But boring needs the same city." He went quiet. August arrived too fast. The day Hugo had to fly to New York for the interview, I drove him to the airport, once again, but this time the feeling was completely different. This wasn't goodbye because of graduation. This was goodbye because of possibility. "If they offer me the job," Hugo started. "I know," I cut in. "We'll figure it out." He looked at me for a long time. "Would you ever move?" The question hung between us like a dare. I had built my career here. I had just been offered a promotion. But I had also learned something in the past year. Love doesn't survive on its own. You have to choose it every single day. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I'm not closing that door." Hugo nodded. "Me neither." We kissed one last time before the security checkpoint. And this time I wasn't just afraid of losing him. I was afraid that one day we might have to choose between love and dreams, and that one of them might not be chosen. But maybe that's what growing up is. Not becoming fearless, but daring to keep walking even when you're scared. As I watched Hugo walk through those doors, I knew Part 2 of our story isn't about the world watching anymore. It's about whether we're brave enough to look straight into the future. Together. Hope this captures the heart of your story. Let me know if you want any part adjusted, made softer, more emotional, or anything else.